So to that end, let me make sure my clicker's working. Of course it isn't. Of course it is. Okay, hi! Come on, London, come on, London, come on. Come on, you're not Sweden, come on. Hi! There it is. Yeah, that's awesome. My name's Lemon, and I make websites. I've been making websites for over 20 years. I still do it because I still find it fun. There's other versions to that. I still do it because I wouldn't be good at manual labor. I still do it because I'm too dumb for a lot of other jobs. But the other reason why I still make websites, both fun and professionally, is that I think it's a really, really fun medium to be in. The coolest thing about the internet that's so much different than like a bunch of other pieces of technology is that failure is only what you say it is. You can go ahead and have a site that you can put together in a weekend, and if you go to ahoylemon.xyz, you can see all sorts of things. There is a gaslighting simulator I have on there you can play. And if you win, you get proven sane. And then if you do that, I get you a sticker to prove that you're sane. But the thing that's great about that is that you can have whatever idea, and there's no central authority. There's no Yoni Eve out there that says like, oh no, this is not follow my standard. I don't even know what that accent was. The internet, you can do what you like, and the only thing that happens is maybe not a lot of people will show up to it. So I currently work for a company called Savas Labs. You've never heard about it? Don't worry about that. We are a development company of about 40-ish people, sort of distributed throughout the United States and Argentina and a little bit of Western Europe. And we, as a company, our general ethos is that, we're an agency. It's an agency. We take what works, comes in the door. Our differentiator is that we try to have 50% of our work be for good. So if you're an organization that works with climate change, if you're an organization that works with sexual health, if you're an organization that does something that's like broadly for good, we're going to try to like change some of those rates to make it make sense so that 50% of our work will be for that. And that's what I've been for 2 years. During that time of being at Savas Labs, they changed my job title. My job title is now that I'm a front-end development director. That is a new job title for me. My job title previously was lead front-end, front-end lead. And the reason why that was my job title is that 2 jobs ago, the COO came up to me and he says, we're meeting with a client in 10 minutes. What's your job title? Front-end lead, yeah. And just sort of walked with that. But now this is something else because this is a job that actually means management. I became management by surprise. They said, do you want this job? And I said, that sounds like a management job. And they were like, maybe, we'll just sign and see what happens. But that means that my job is largely about, it's mentoring, it's shepherding, it's documenting. That still means that I am on the keyboard. I still get to write code. I still get to write real code that actually goes into real life. But less of my job, by hours, is devoted to actually doing deployable code and more into creating sort of like systems by which other people can write accessible code that's fast and performant and not filled with a lot of crap, if possible. So that's what I have been doing and trying to like help other people do, and it's been like new fun challenges. And it means that I am a very serious professional, which is, well, you laughed at that. I had a punchline. Like, there's me in my pajamas playing Shooty Fruity on the Oculus, but no, it didn't matter because I was like, I'm a serious professional. I was like, yeah. All right, now you're right. Your impulses were absolutely correct. But I want to talk about me being fucking fancy or whatever in now. I want to talk about where it actually came from in the beginning, because I came from doing this kind of job in the bad old days. And I want to define the bad old days, which is that my job was a very simple plan. We didn't have the idea of, we're going to do a waterfall, we're going to do cards, we're going to have issue tickets. This is what the graph of my job looked like. There was a PSD file, and I made it into an HTML file. Literally, that was my job. And I worked for somebody at that point, my first ever web development mentor was a woman named Cindy Brinson, who's still terrific. She's at HubSpot right now. But she taught me how to do that version of my job, which was that at that point, websites were 960 pixels that existed in the middle of the screen. Everything else was bullshit. Who cares? I don't know, repeating JPEG, who cares? The 960 pixels that were in the middle of the screen were the parts that mattered. And so I would take that, I would turn it into a PNG file, put it at 50% opacity, and lay it over the screen. And that was what I did. I had 50% opacity, and then I just wrote the code so that my code matched that ping exactly to the pixel. There wasn't some sort of blurry mix or whatever, because I knew what all of the text was going to be, at least in that round. So I was just making the exact reproduction. And that was before shit like, rounded corners even. And so that meant that I had to, get a little bit better technically at that job by doing awful stuff like slices and little 95 pings that are all sort of locked in there. And this wasn't glamorous by any stretch of the imagination. This wasn't a job that you would be really, really, really stoked to be like, I'm gonna do this for years. But it was something that had a sense of completion. I knew that I was done when my website looked exactly like the ping. And I did like that part of it, because I did know when I was done. In that world, the kind of power structure of what a website development looks like, the website development team looked like this. We had a var, because it's the past, there's no such thing as const yet. We had a website, and the designer was the brains, and the developer was the hands. The designer would think of something, like a Rodin sculpture. They would go into their mind palace, and they would come up with a beautiful, delightful, delicious, full-fledged design that would be bestowed upon you in a chalice, and you simply had to drink from the cup. And then responsive web design just kind of killed all of that. It was gone. You didn't have that ability to do that thing. And yes, of course, they tried to do a couple things to sort of keep that along. They tried to do m.facebook and, let's make this website and then let's make this other website. And then, what would be good for our bottom line is if we just have 2 different websites. Oh shit, a third form factor exists? Well, why don't we have 3 different websites? This'll be really great to maintain. That power structure was eventually going away. That metric had to change. And so we got there. Responsive web design brought us there. We took a situation where we had a monarchy, and yes, I know we're in Westminster, and yes, I know we all love the monarchy, and we all appreciate it and respect it, but we took that monarchy and we said, nah, we're gonna have to have some collaboration here. But sometimes collaboration has consequences. This is a talk that comes from pain. And this is a place where, when I say to you, I've been making websites for 20 years, do you think all of them were great? Do you think half of them were great? Made a lot of shit along the way. I made an entire website with knockout.js. Any of you familiar? Yeah, would you do that? Would you? No, you would not do that. That is correct. Yeah, it's still up. It's still up, and it's still 100% dependent on knockout.js. I made a software platform that the CEO is a very design-centric CEO. It is very, very designy kind of CEO. He was never happy with it. And so it was a software product that did a very specific thing. There was millions of dollars on the line, but he wasn't happy with it. And so he took different designers, 3 different designers, all of which were his particular golden child at that moment. He took each of them individually and he said, I need you to redesign this. So I worked with all 3 of the designers, and I redesigned the software product 3 times. That never launched. Never launched. Somebody else got to market before we did because we kept redesigning it. I worked with that same one of those 3 designers, and I showed him something called Lottie. Any familiar with Lottie? Have you seen this before? It's neat. It is totally neat. But Lottie is basically a library where you can animate SVGs. You can take kind of like timelines and do, flashy kind of shit, right? You can spin pinwheels and you can change colors and you can kind of like make fun physics and whatever. And you can take that and basically just put it on the screen in bits of kind of incomprehensible like CSS and SVG, and it becomes animation. So I showed it to him, and it comes with a kind of like toolkit that you can use to sort of lay it out in a very Adobe kind of way. And he said, all right, can we do the whole website like this? Yeah, we could. I mean, it was kind of cool, but like it wasn't a good idea. And like there's no semantics there. Like everything is just a whole bunch of SVGs. I did a mobile app entirely in a program called Adobe PhoneGap. You familiar with this? Yeah, I was in Spain last year, met Simon Marcotte, and I was talking to him, and I was like, wait, didn't you work on Adobe PhoneGap? And he said, yeah, no, I actually wrote most of the code to make Adobe PhoneGap work. And I said, oh, yeah, because I made an app with Adobe PhoneGap. And he went, yeah, sorry. I've made a bunch of mistakes, and I also had to, in situations, like try to meet people where they were at. I worked with designers who had specifically only experience in print, and didn't really understand some of those things, and genuinely were terrified at the prospect. They didn't know what was in front of them. They didn't know what the challenge was, and so they were like, okay, well, I'm used to making posters, and this is a thing that exists on a phone, and so at one point, I took the screenshot out. I didn't want to put somebody on blast. But at one point, I had somebody give me the site design inside of an iPhone 6. Because he was like, this has to live inside of an iPhone, so I made the website live inside of an iPhone. I did good? You did great, dude. That was awesome. I've also been the jerk. I've been the jerk in these situations, and I don't want to admit that, but I should. I should admit that I've been the jerk in several situations. I have been snide about other people's designs. I don't like that I have been that, but I have. I've seen somebody and been like, well, that's maybe as good as you can do. I didn't say that to them. I thought it, which is still pretty bad, but I said it. I said it to other people. That sucks. I hate that I did that. I had situations where I took somebody's sort of like little design thing and went, I don't really want to do that, so we won't. This is my camp right now, and I have the ability to make these changes, and nobody can really stop me, so I'm just not going to work on that particular piece because I don't love it. I hate that that's true of me, but that's absolutely true of me. And the other thing that's true of me is that I have at time, and I think that I bet a bunch of you can resonate with this, I have had situations where I've said, nah, you can't do that. You just can't, you can't do that. And what I was actually meaning was that I don't want to do that. Because it's difficult. Because I'm not saying that it's something that I don't want to do because I'm capricious and sort of tricky in that particular regard, and tee-hee-hee. I'm saying you do something here that was going to require a whole lot of work. I don't want to explain how much work it's going to be, and so I'm just going to kind of say no. And that honesty was something I didn't do. I just said I can't do that. And that's not how I grow as a person, because I want to be getting designs, I want to be working with people that are giving me things that are challenging. I want them to be giving me things where I go, yeah, we can figure that out. As long as we're honest about how long this is going to take and the compromises we might have with your design, we can do this, and we can grow from this. So let's talk about collaboration, and it's got a very simple agenda. First of all, we're just going to talk about the typical projects. All of you work at particularly, different companies. I don't know what that might look like, but you're going to have your typical projects, and there's going to be a typical process. In those projects, there's going to be kind of like the things that we do and the systems that have like a very common functionality and always will be the same across the board, and there's going to be a typical hierarchy. There's going to be the people that are working, that are perhaps the people that are, higher ups, decision makers. They're the people who talk too much. They're the people who don't talk enough. Probably less of those than the first. And then the collaboration that we can have within this. So we can talk about all these things because they are common every single time that we do a web project. And then after that, I'm going to give each of you £1,000. Every one of you, just look under your seat. That's all a lie. That's all a lie because there's no typical experience. I've been working for agencies for the vast majority of my professional life. I like it. And I know that it looks different in a lot of situations. But I also know that there's not a typical experience, even at the same agency, even working for the same client. Not a typical experience. So again, in an agency model, it looks one way, kind of, right? We'll have a situation where if we've got a project that's coming through, we might have this process of what we call biz dev. That means sales. Sales is what we mean to say, but we're saying it in a cute way. And so we're saying, okay, well, what does the client want? What are we kind of looking for? And then we're going to do a discovery phase. At my company, we always do a discovery phase because we want to kind of make the right decisions later and down the road of what does your organization need? What are some things that we can kind of do to service those needs? And just spend a little bit of time up front, asking some questions so that we know what questions we want to answer later on. From that, we're going to have some problems that we've identified, and so we're going to start to think about solutions. And so we go into the point of UX. Let's start to do some wireframes. Let's start to do some sitemaps. Let's do some sort of rounds. Let's present wireframes to the client because every client wants to look at wireframes. They love it. They're really interested. They're very engaged when you bring them those things. We're going to bring that over to design. That's where they start to care a little bit more, and we kind of flesh out some of this stuff. And then we're going to probably do front-end and back-end development, perhaps at the same time, perhaps at different times. I kind of like to do it where, especially if it's CMS work, which happens in my line of work pretty frequently, do all of the actual sketching in HTML, with a bunch of lorem ipsum kind of content, and then wire that back up while the backend's happening at the same time. And then finally, a round of QA. Sort of basically kind of what looks like an agency model, but then there's the software model where okay, we're going to write a proposal and we're going to do a feature for our software. And so we need to do a feature, and so we're going to write up some requirements for what that feature is going to look like. Let's document all this thing appropriately. Let's have our estimation, because we need to have estimation. And let's play planning poker. Because every single time I've played planning poker, this is not a bullshit exercise. I think that'll take 2 hours. I think that'll take 4 hours. I think this meeting just took an hour. So we're going to have that estimation. We're going to kind of put a little number on it, and then we're going to start to get into actual development. We're going to do some development on that. We probably already have some sort of framework that we can kind of work inside of, and so we might kind of expand a little bit of what that means, and we probably also have a design system that we're working inside of. We don't have to create a new brand in this case, but maybe we have to change a little bit to fit with this new feature. And we need to document this. We need to document all of this to make sure that it works. And then finally test against that documentation and against those requirements. That's sometimes what it looks like. And then there's another model that happens sometimes, which is okay, so somebody wrote a check, and I remember that happened, and then there was this Zoom call, and I think we had a Postgres database that exists, but they don't like it, and so it was gonna be CockroachDB or Zeta, I wanna say, and Tim was the project manager on it. He's on paternity leave, so maybe we can talk to Tim. I'm not sure when Tim's back from paternity leave, but we'll talk about that with him once he gets to, oh my God. Okay, that was fine. Let's do that again. That felt really good. I feel really satisfied by all of that. Whatever it looks like, we're going to have multiple stages. We're going to have multiple people. But one of the common elements that we can have with that thing is that there is going to be a team of 6, 3, 12, 40 people. But there's probably one person that's doing the most active work at one particular time. One person that's not the most senior, that's not the most important, that's not the most fancy, but the person that's just pushing the rock the most at that time. And so that's what I want to talk about, which is that I want to introduce you to a concept called the driver. This is a scene from Baby Driver. Never seen it. It's fantastic. You got Angela Elbert. It's really, really fun. It's basically the entire thing shot like a music video. You got John Spencer Blues Explosion in the beginning. Bell bottoms. Very, very delightful. But the driver doesn't have to look like this. The driver can look like a lot of different things. Maybe the driver looks like, like a sexy Canadian who isn't super duper great at acting. Maybe he looks like a sexy New Yorker who, at this point, had not yet become a parody of himself. Maybe it's a sexy weirdo who's equally as good at crying as he is at being shirtless, and he is great at both of those things. Or maybe it's a sexy Londoner, because yes, of course, minis can be drivers, because women can be drivers too. But no matter what, the only thing that we have to keep in mind with this concept is that there can only be one driver at a time. Whoever it is that is the person at that moment making the most progressive impact on that project gets to be the driver at that time. So that's going to change, right? Because we might have a situation where, again, we're in biz dev, sales, that word means sales, and we're going to say, okay, well, let's talk about your needs and how much money we're actually talking about there. Or maybe they're the driver. The sales guy's the driver. I'm using a lot of male pronouns right now. I'm recognizing that, and I'm just acknowledging it, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm recognizing it. We might be in a planning stage. And so we're going to figure out, who's available, who's going to work on this thing, and maybe the project manager at that point is the driver at that particular moment. We've got a thing where, okay, so now we got some ideas, we know what we're going to do, we're going to kind of explore this thing. We've got a UX designer. We have maybe on our team, we have UX designers and UI designers. And so the UX person will be the driver at this particular stage. Go down and we can kind of recognize that at various phases, in various even hours, there can be different people who are the most responsible for doing it right now. They are the most responsible for doing it right now. It's the junior developer who's working on the style sheet. It is the UX designer who's trying to piece together the wireframe. It is the project manager who's trying to figure out who are the people that we should be using on this particular project. It's that person, because that hat can change as many times as appropriate. But the driver by himself is kind of a dork. A driver has a certain set of skills, but without backup, doesn't really amount to much. You need other people. Yes, Ansel Elbert, great driver, right? But you're also going to need your John Hamm. You're going to need your Jamie Foxx. You're going to need Lily James. You're going to need Eliza Gonzalez. And somebody else is in that movie, but...
I think it was Hatsune Miku.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Hatsune Miku, absolutely. That's the person, that's the other person that's in that movie. We're going to have a team. And so these other people is going to be his second concept here, and that is the concept of the navigator. And similarly, that's going to look like a lot of different things. Of course, there's a shot from the movie Flight of the Navigator, which is delightful. Differently delightful, obviously, than Baby Driver. We have me typing into Google, hey, what are the walking directions from Minneapolis to London? All right, okay, fine, all right. The Buster Keaton movie nobody saw. Yeah, I did do Wikipedia disambiguation. I needed 4 things to match with the previous 4 things. Because obviously we knew that the other one was going to be Netscape Navigator. The software is so suspect that people looked at Microsoft Internet Explorer and went, yeah, maybe I'll give that one a shot. You know what? That seems a little bit less weird. Unlike the driver, though, our navigator can look like a lot of different things. There can, and in fact, maybe should be multiple navigators on a project in order to kind of keep everything running, keep everybody engaged, keep somebody honest, and also to recognize that the person that's actually doing the most actual work, right? The person that's doing the most typing is not necessarily the person that wants to do the most brain work. If I'm being like, you know, productive or whatever, like in a code editor at that particular moment, and I'm writing my little like Sass mixins and stuff like that, the only reason why I'm productive in that particular moment is that I'm not thinking about a lot of other things. And the thing that slows me down when I'm trying to write a for loop, when I'm trying to write like a 300-line Sass file, 300, 30,000. When I'm trying to write these Sass files is the idea of, oh wait, let me consider that also there's this other thing, and if I have to make all these considerations, that's what's gonna slow me down. At the point that I'm the driver and trying to like push that thing forward, the less of that kind of brain work I can have at that moment, offload that into the trust of other people, the more I'm gonna be benefited. Because we're in the car together, and that stock photo sucks, and I knew that it sucked, and I didn't take it out of the deck, because I couldn't find a better one, and I kind of like that joke anyway. So we've got both of these things. Our driver here, who's just trying to tell you to stay calm, and our navigators, who are producing only the most meaningful and helpful comments about why Scratchy's rib cage makes two different notes at the same. I'm about to quote The Simpsons, and that is me being a stereotype at a software development conference. So we're gonna move on because, so like what does the navigator do at this point? And I got some examples. So we're gonna look at examples in the UX stage. But first an aside, just wanna mention this real quick, UX is not the same as UI. Not exactly the same. Sometimes that's the same job, sometimes it's the same person. Sometimes a UX designer and a UI designer are the same person, and that's totally okay. It's just not the same job. User experience, UX, is the idea of what is our user trying to do, and how can we help them do their specific thing? How can we make them accomplish these goals? We're not even talking about buttons at this point. We're just talking about how to do the mental logic of getting your goals and, frankly, the business's goals accomplished through the user. And then, like, you know, how good does it look? Let's make this really good and pretty. So, like, the UX is really the theory. The UI is the execution. Anyway, total aside. So going back into this idea of like, what does the navigator do? Well, okay, so if we've got a situation where we're in the UX phase, then we can say like, well, do you see an image being required? Because if you have a design that you're putting together in Figma, in XD, in Photoshop, if you're doing that, then you're going to probably be presenting that to somebody. And so you're going to be providing best case scenarios. Your headlines are going to be reasonable. Your article summaries are going to be reasonable. Your photos are not going to be terrible. And if you give that over to a client and say, here you go, here's the backend, go ahead and put whatever content you like, they will, and none of those things will be true anymore. So if you have a situation where, for example, you have a layout that's dependent on an image being there, let's make sure we write down that that is a hard requirement. Yes, this image has to be there because the design doesn't work out, or if it's done. Or it doesn't have to be there. We can make it look like this. Because that way, you get to have the situation where that's established. We can recognize that in both the back end and the front end so that we don't have to have a situation of like, actually, if you don't have an image in there, it kind of looks like crap. Yeah, sorry about that, I guess. I don't know. Nobody's really paying attention. It'd be like a tagging system. And we could have a situation where at this phase, like the idea of doing content discovery is supposed to work in a particularly different way. We might have a situation where like there's like two different like filters in a multi-select. We're talking about the UX stage, so we might have a situation where we've got a bunch of ways to like filter down to the actual website look, and we might have a lot of situations where we're creating empty states. And is it too easy to get to empty states? Is it too easy to click on an inactive tag? Is it too easy to filter against this thing and this thing? And can we have a situation where it's a little bit less easy to get into these, you know, like rotten paths? But also, like, I really like this thing right there. Is incredibly valuable in this stage because we can say, you know, hey, this thing is good because that gets to influence our design. And also, it's nice to give compliments. It's a good idea to give compliments. And it's something that might get thrown away if you're just thinking pragmatically and not thinking about that is a human. That is a human doing their best, and we're going to kind of acknowledge that. And if I see something nice, I'm not saying make this up. Do not make this up. But if you see it and if you feel it and something that is nice at that moment, it's worth saying it. We go on the visual design stage and we're gonna have a situation where we're gonna start to run into these ideas of responsive design, right? Where if we've got, for example, our big old layout, because this is still a thing. This is definitely still a thing in the design dev. Turn to Snoop Dogg for a sec there. Anyway, we're in our moment of the handoff, and we might have a situation where we've got our desktop display and our mobile display. It's still a very common thing to happen. And the thing that can create is a situation where, in some cases, there will be the display that exists for, 860 pixels and up, and then 879 pixels and down. And there's just one hard change. Which, if that's the thing that's agreed on, is the thing that's agreed on. That's not personally the way that I like to do it. I kind of like this idea of for example, if we've got a 4 grid, and we're gonna go, okay, well here we've got a 4-up kind of grid display, and eventually we know it's gonna get down to a 1 grid, but should we do a situation where there's a 3 grid, there's a 2 grid, or whatever? At what point can we make these breaks happen? And because it can be different. It can be different in a lot of other cases. And to have those situations of those breakpoints just described is gonna have a situation where we don't have to have the thing that we end up doing a lot. The thing that we end up doing a lot is here is your pretty poster. And it looks really, really, really nice. And then eventually you're gonna get down to about here. You're gonna get to iPad tall. And it's just that. Because that's pretty easy to write. And that's a thing that we do a lot. And sometimes, if you're down to 320 pixels, you have to be there. But maybe sometimes you don't have to be there quite as early. What are the focus and hover and active states for this button? Something that's super duper duper easy to miss. I never blame anyone for missing those particular moments, because if you're working in a not particularly interactive medium, super easy to miss that, and it's okay. But I want to be having conversations about, okay, cool, you've got this button display, or these large active target cards or whatever, and these are clickable, targetable elements. So let's talk about these interactive states, and let's talk about how this thing looks. And hover state, but there's 2 other states. There's 2 other states that are also super important. If I'm hitting tab on your website and I don't know where I am, I'm not saying you're bad, I'm not saying you're evil, but I wish that wasn't the case. I sure wish there was an active and hover state for all of these situations. And we can just get there by just a couple of pieces of conversation. Because otherwise, what? You're gonna make your own decisions, or you're just gonna not do it? It's not your fault. We just didn't get there because we didn't have that conversation. This is a thing that I run into very frequently, and this is specifically 2 elements that always stand out to me. One of them is HTML select, and the other one is input type date. Both of those elements are kind of great. Select a little bit less so. But they work out pretty good, because if I write select option, 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 I don't have to think about your viewport. I don't have to think about your device. I really like not having to do that. I really like not having to have a whole bunch of divs. And man, if I get to write input type date, I get to save so much crap. I don't have to build a calendar. I don't have to care about your specific, oh, it's month and date. No, we do. I don't care. It's not interesting to me. I know that there's gonna be ISO 9601 on the output, and I know that the input's whatever your country says it is. And the interface with it is gonna be what's appropriate to you. If you're on Safari, it's gonna look, iOS-y. If you're on Windows, it'll look kind of crummy. And that's what you're used to, so that's okay. I want to not do those things if I can avoid it. And so if we have a situation where there's something that's a little bit bespoke, because it's a little bit in the brand colors, is okay, got it. I get what you're saying. Can we get 98% of the way there for way less hours? Because probably. But also, like, I was thinking about this navigation element, and I was putting together this code pen. Like, I think that that's a really fun thing to do, is like, I was kind of working through this idea, and I couldn't really, like, see it forward. And I'm going to stub in a bunch of stuff and just kind of, like, lorem ipsum, but, like, is this kind of what we're going for? Or, like, you know, we could probably use this. Maybe we don't need to do a full-on page load. Maybe we can simplify this with a, you know, like little async call or something like that. Because it might be that the designer is thinking that they don't necessarily know all of the technology that's around it. So they might be accidentally making things more difficult because they don't know that it can be simpler. And that's okay too. And you're not saying this is better. Well, I guess you kind of a little bit are, but you're saying this is a suggestion of something that could make this a little bit better for everybody. You know, and then like everything's just kind of taken from somewhere else. So like if we can kind of like point to those like little pieces of reference, like that's always valuable for everybody. And like this typography looks amazing. You got like 3 minutes. You got 3 minutes and you want a designer to like you? Compliment their font choices. Their specific choices in the typography is going to make them like you a lot. Because what we want to avoid in all of this is the idea of like a bad marriage. We don't want to be in a bad marriage. Not to say this was. But in a bad relationship, we're going to have a situation where like the designer is going to feel like unnecessarily restricted. I don't want that to be the case. I don't want any designer that I would ever work with to think that they're painting inside of the numbers, to think that they have to work within my limitations. And like, the web's just not cool like that. The web's just not awesome like that. Like, we can't do this thing. So like, I'm gonna change this and I'm just gonna kind of like work inside of this template because like, that's really all it is. And if the only thing else is like a whole bunch of fighting and I don't want to do that. I feel guilty knowing that there's been situations that I've made that happen by accident. Well, not by accident, intentionally. Where I've made that happen because somebody was just sort of afraid to go a little bit outside of what they thought the lines are. But I also don't feel disrespected. I am not ever going back to the idea of PSD to HTML. That is not going to be my life ever again. And I don't want any of us to go back to that. I don't want any of us to look at something like Wix and be like, yeah, I guess that's the future. Because like, you ever looked inside of a Wix product? I mean, you know. We shouldn't be like that. And we shouldn't be in the situation where everybody's kind of like, you know, no code stuff is cool too. I don't have any sort of problem with that. But this idea of like, we need to basically cut out the developer because they're not really a fundamental part of the process. They're just somebody we have to use to get from point A to point B is not acceptable. And I don't want anyone to feel unheard. I want to hear you. And I want to sometimes go, thanks a bunch. I want a good relationship. This is Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. Actually, not a marriage. Never been married. But they've been together since like 1983, I want to say. And like at a particular time in Hollywood where, you know, for some reason, marriages didn't last a whole long time. In a good relationship, we're going to ask questions of each other. We're going to suggest improvements. We're going to respect other people's craft. To say that I have some sort of opinions about color theory or typography or design or whatever is true. I do. But I'm also going to respect everyone's craft of the people that I work with to go, you are a professional that is more knowledgeable in your field. And I'm going to respect you for that because you're going to respect me as well. And also, I'm going to say the thing, you're going to hear it, and that's the end of it. When we get into the situation where I have a suggestion or I have a way that things could be better, and I have something I want to bring up. I mean, I was looking at this design, and it's okay, but like, I think if we actually did it like this, it would be cool and, you know, whatever. We all should be able to get to the point where we can feel comfortable saying that thing to the people that we work with. I'm not just a pair of hands, so I have an opinion about something that could make this better. You should be able to say that, and that other person should hear that. The third thing is not in your hands. Because maybe I'm going to hear that thing, and maybe it's okay, heard. And when you're bringing these things up, and when you're kind of like coming to the table with your thoughts and with your opinions, know that coming to the table means sometimes you are heard, and sometimes, even if you believe in your heart of hearts that you were right, it's still not going to be the decision that you go with. And that's okay, because you're going to be in that conversation many, many, many times. So another time you're going to win. And so sometimes you're going to lose. And that's all right. There's a whole lot of money in different collaboration tools. There's a whole lot of different collaboration tools over there, and there's a whole lot of lunatics in San Francisco that have money to put into those tools. And some of those are genuinely pretty good. I think at my job we use, I don't know, however many of them. There's Slack, and we use GitHub for a whole lot of things. Kind of use all the Google Suite stuff. We kick teamwork out. Like we've been kind of like, oh, you do Harvest. And all of that stuff is good. And, because we want to kind of like go into work to know like, I'm supposed to do things today. I want to know what I'm going to do today. And so like collaboration tools are okay and are sometimes very necessary, but like they're not solving the actual problem. The collaboration is the thing that's solving the problem. And the collaboration is the thing we're trying to solve in the first place. And so like, in a bunch of these situations, we don't necessarily have, a perfect answer. This isn't a hard technical talk. This is an airy, feelingsy talk, right? So I don't have perfect solutions. I definitely don't have things that are gonna work 100% of the time. But like, what if 2 people wanna drive? Well, cool. If 2 people want to drive, that's okay, because there's going to be lots of opportunities for this to happen. So if 2 people want to drive, we're going to pick one, but we want those people to understand that, like, maybe you'll get another shot. If there's 2 people that want to drive, I'm hoping that there's a third person that can say, it's Tanya, Like, making that decision to go, okay, well, this is the person that's going to drive at this particular situation. If nobody wants to drive, that's a little bit more of a problem. Because there's problems that you can run into where, too many people care too much. It's a much larger problem of just nobody cares that much. So hopefully in that situation, we can kind of like put somebody in the position of saying, you're going to drive, I'm going to put somebody else to that. If it's that much of a vacuum of, if there's that much of a vacuum of an actual project owner, that seems like a problem. That's not a collaboration problem. It seems like a larger problem as well. If you're too busy to talk, like I get it. Like I definitely get like that. And I know that like for sometimes people have tried like open office hours of like, I'm just gonna be on Slack, I'm gonna have my microphone on, but like I'm not really gonna talk. Or not like we're not gonna have like a scheduled meeting. I'm just gonna kind of like work with my microphone on. And that's okay. I don't love it, but it works okay. And like, what if somebody just sucks? Dude, that happens. That super duper duper happens. And so if you can come to that person that you think sucks in good faith, 2 things. The optimist would say that if you can come to somebody in good faith and say, hey, why don't we try to like, work together and whatever, and I'm gonna give you some compliments and see if you can kind of like return to me, then hopefully that relationship changes. Maybe that person didn't suck as much as we thought. But the other thing is like, if that person does suck and you do try to do good faith stuff and they do come back with, being a jerk, well, and now you got something at least documentable. Some nice things, sketching or sharing a concept or like prototype, anything that I'm working on, I kind of like to do like sort of screenshots of like UI interactions that I'm having at the moment of like, hey, here's what I'm looking at. Tell me what you think. If there's changes that you want, this is a work in progress. I always think is helpful to the process. I invite to a quick huddle. I know that works for some people, it doesn't work for others. I like it a lot, personally. I sure like a 7-minute like Slack huddle as opposed to like, 95 text messages back and forth. Because at that point, like the 7-minute huddle is something I have to think about once, and then it's done. The text message is something I think about every time I hear, and that's just harder on my brain. Because if I have to think of a couple things at once, like having to come back to this conversation over and over again while we're kind of figuring this out, is, to me at least, more expensive than just being, okay, well, let's have a conversation right now and see if we can kind of get this thing resolved. And then just compliments in general. Like, there's a lot there. There's some bad things, though. The pocket veto. The pocket veto, has anyone ever heard this term? Yes?
I mean, from U.S. politics, you literally veto it by putting it in your pocket and not seeing to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the sins I was sort of confessing at the beginning is that I have done this. I've done this where, it was in my hands. I was the person that was going to turn this thing out, and I looked at a piece of work, and I looked at the design, and I went, nah, I don't feel like it, and I just didn't. It's evil. Because it's a proper sin. And it's a proper sin because it super works for right now. It feels pretty good at that moment. I didn't want to do this, and then I didn't. That's awesome. It will never be the future. It's always right now. Avoiding this situation and just trying to have a more difficult conversation first to avoid doing this, when you feel pressure to do this, is so much more valuable. Saying something like this is meaningless. Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't like that design. What is anyone gonna do with that? Like, oh shit, whoops, I accidentally made something that sucks. I hope you wouldn't notice. Thanks for pointing out that I made a bad design. You don't like it? Oh, thank God. All right, well, let's fix this. You want the good version? I have that right here. This is version 2. If it's true, it's still not worth saying. Derision of work in general, that thing where if you've got somebody's situation, and different people are at different levels of their career. Different people have, especially if we're talking about something that's like, creative or whatever, like front end and like design can be, then people might be at different places. You might not love somebody's work. You might not love somebody's work in your heart of hearts, and you know that's true, and you know that it's something that you can't get rid of. You don't need to say that to anybody that you work with. Because it's not valuable. It's not valuable, and it's not necessarily going to help somebody. Have a drink with a friend and bitch about work, because that's how that's supposed to work. And like wild-ass changes, At the point that you're like waist deep into the project, you're going, and then you've got like, well, actually, if we did this whole thing in Svelte, okay, cool, we're not there. Stop, just suck. Yeah, you're very smart. I like how smart you are. That's awesome. It's just, we don't need to have that conversation because it won't ever actually go anywhere. And the worst thing, and I'm saying that again, I've been in an agency environment for most of my life, and I feel like that's where this really comes into play, is that you're going to eventually be talking to the person that has the money to spend, the person that has the opinions, the person whose opinions that you do care about, and you're going to present them your work. And in that thing, I'm going to call that the client, because in my life, that's what that person is called, is the client. And in that situation, never, ever, 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 ever contradict your team. Don't take that moment to be like, I'm going to win. You know what? Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah, that thing that you said, oh, I totally agree. What is that going to do? That doesn't help anything. That doesn't help the project get along. That definitely doesn't win you points. You're just trying to sideload in favor, and it's not going to work out for you. It's going to build discord. And if you've got a situation, and I have had this situation, where somebody on your team says something that's inappropriate and wrong, You're gonna start to have conversations about how we need to take that offline and, well, we'll take 5 and huddle back and any sort of, cliche, well, let's loop back around and bury our heads. You're trying to say, it's like when your parents are fighting. I'm a parent. I don't fight in front of my child. I fight when my child's not around. Honestly, I just wanted to show more breakdancing, and this video kicks ass. It's like a dance troupe out of New Zealand. There's 100 of them. Fantastic. Client's gonna think that you're a great team. You're experts, you've considered everything, you're all on the same page. We're talking about something especially when we're talking about something like front-end development and design, there's a whole lot of correct ways. If I'm the person that's paying you money to do design and front-end development, what I need you to convince me is that you have thought of everything. You have really took my best interest at heart. And I'm gonna convey that to you, because that's the value that I'm trying to provide to you. And finally,
you never open your mouth till you know what the shot is.
he was in that movie too. So to recap, identify your driver, whoever it might be in that situation. I think I've hammered on this driver metaphor enough, so I'm not going to keep going there. But empower your navigators. Let those people think that they can have thoughts and opinions. Let those people know that they're trying to push you around by helping, by expanding, by growing. Let those people be wrong every once in a while. But make suggestions that maybe aren't super duper awesome, but they still feel okay about making them, because then some good suggestions are going to come as well. And have frequent respectful conversations in whatever form they might be. You might have to figure that out different with different people. There might be somebody, if you're in an office, that's going to be, well, let's have a meeting over here, or let's have this little sync or whatever. Because one of the things about having those kinds of conversations to go okay, well, in this little part, can we figure out what to do about this card flip or whatever? As long as you get to have those conversations respectfully and quickly, means you get to have less fucking meetings. And then you don't have to have the 2-hour meetings. You don't have to have the daily stand-ups, because sometimes those are helpful. Sometimes those are helpful. And finally, just make cool shit, because it's the internet, and the internet needs more cool shit on it. There's a bunch of cool shit on the internet, but there's a bunch of crap, and the only thing that changes that percentage is us doing it a little bit better. So thank you very much. My name's Lemon. That's Simone right there in the back. That's Simone. And I do have stickers that I would love to give you if you want to come up, and any of them that you like. I got these lemon stickers. They're very reflective and nice. Look like that, but smaller and hopefully on your laptop. I've also got these stickers, which still amuse me very much, which is just a sticker that says maybe you don't need all that JavaScript. Maybe not all of that was necessary. Then there's a special sticker. Like I said at the beginning of this talk, if you go to sane.science, you will get 20 questions about whether or not you are sane. All of those questions are meant to gaslight you and make you feel uncomfortable about your own sanity, but at the end, you get to be proven sane. And if you are, I can give you this sticker. So do please come up and any of those you like. But thank you so much again, and enjoy the rest of the show.